Hi, I'm Dolly Curtis, and I'm with Joanna Smith in Easton, Connecticut. And Joanna and I have been friends for about 20 years. And Joanna Smith is a lace maker, and I am just in another world here today, seeing these beautiful pieces of lace that you have collected and found and brought together from all over the world. And I am really impressed. This is beautiful, Joanna.
Well, I'm really glad to have you in my home, Dolly, and I'll share some of my passion with you for this lace.
How does anybody even begin to get themselves in this whole adventure that you've gotten yourself into?
I think I really grew into it. When I was a child, my grandmother had taught me some needlework skills. She was a dressmaker in Europe. And during the summers, my mother and grandparents taught me different needlework skills. One year it was crochet, one year it was needlework, and then...
So in other words, you did cross-stitch in the summertime when everyone else was playing?
Yeah. And then when I was about 8 years old, my dad took me to Sturbridge Village, and I saw a weaver there, and that was it. I mean, at that age, every other girl wanted a Barbie doll. I wanted a loom.
I could just see you.
And I would just fantasize about weaving. But it wasn't for years. I mean, no one at that time, I didn't know anybody who knew anything about weaving. I just thought it was up at Sturbridge. When I got married, I moved to Brookfield, and there was a shop there. I saw the looms, and my husband made me promise that I would take a class first.
So did you go to the Brookfield Craft Center?
No, I went to, there was a shop named A Potter and a Weaver.
Oh, sure.
And I took a class there, right in the center of Newtown on Main Street, and I fell in love the first day, and that's how it started with the weaving. And as I wove, and I got finer and finer, and once I got to 100 threads per inch.
I can't believe that. 100 threads per inch is crazy.
I did some linen, about 100 threads per inch, and then the detail wasn't fine enough for me. But I didn't know, I figured that was as far as I can go on the loom that I had. So when I go places and look for books, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or Sturbridge, I always get a book on weaving, something. And I was there one day and saw a book, and lo and behold, this is what I saw on the cover. I said, what is that? I had no idea what bobbin lace making was. I had no idea. Bought the book, and I was hooked. From that minute on, I almost like let weaving die.
Poor weaving. But what is this right here? I mean, is this...
What you see here, this is a contemporary lace making pillow, and it's sectioned into blocks, which allows you, as you could see, I have a handkerchief pattern here, and this allows me to move the pattern as I work. But what you're actually looking at here, I'm working on a piece, it's called Buck's Point lace. It's an English lace, and these are English bobbins. They're called Midlands bobbins.
Okay, they're beautiful. These are all made by hand?
They're all made by, yeah, men will make them on the lathe. As you could see, I have some here that are hand painted with lace on them. The decor here in my living room happens to be the blue and white china. I have a whole set here that are painted with the blue and white export patterns.
Now, do you have to go all over the world to find these? You don't just find these bobbins.
There are some suppliers that have them in the States. Most of these I did get in England. You can even see I have some blown glass ones here, which I know is close to your heart.
All blown glass, and all these are glass beads. These are glass
some of them,
edges.
Most of them are glass beads, and I bead them myself.
Oh, you do?
Some of them are sold with the beads on them, but I like to personalize them.
I wish to hold this up for the...
I don't have any... I don't have any antique ones on this pillow. They've become a collectible, and the prices are really out of sight. I do have some, but I refuse to pay the prices. Although some of these are pricey too. The hand-painted ones are
I can't imagine when you move this pillow, all these very fine threads are going to all tangle.
What happens is these bobbins are a handle for the thread. That's how I relate to it. And you're manipulating, but actually when you are making the lace, you're only using 2 pair of bobbins at a time. So you're only manipulating these 4.
And then you move across?
And then you move...
Only the width you need.
Yeah, you
use them all.
As you could see, you could see this is a narrow pattern here. And I probably have, I'm not quite sure, but maybe somewhere like 72 pair of bobbin here.
Now, somewhere there's a magnifying glass here, and this is essential to this work. We were looking at the lace through a magnifying glass. We seem to have put it somewhere, but I can see where the magnifying glass is essential to this because the work is so fine. It's just hard to imagine.
The pattern of dots that you see here are very fine, and that's what you need. That's your pattern, and that's where you place your pins.
Are you working 100 threads to the inch now?
You can't gauge that way.
You don't work
with
that
this.
way, like
no,
weaving.
you don't use it that way. But as you can see, there are different sections here. This is a cloth section to make the thicker one. You have the pattern section here.
So in other words, what you were telling me before is there's bobbin lace. This is bobbin lace.
Yes.
Then in some of these exquisite pieces you have
A needle
lace.
And
then
it's made purely with a needle
like
and
a spider web just built upon itself.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, we wanted to tell you, the audience, I don't know where to begin with such a fascinating and rich collection of lace that Joanna's could be a museum in any country. I mean, what you've done here. She's brought together lace from where? Belgium, France,
and England. What I usually, I started my collection of the Western European laces because they're the ones that interest me the most. They're very intricate. There were other places like, the Irish lace, that happens to be a little bit heavier.
And you've done some very contemporary things with them. You've made those shadow boxes that are exquisite. You have a textile, you have a background in interior design?
I'm an interior designer, and besides color and style, I also love texture and detail. That's one of my big things, detail. And that's what draws me to the lace because it is so fine and so perfect.
Let's show the audience a few samples of this lace. I mean, it's all over us in this beautiful home of yours, which is what, 1700s?
About 1700s.
And everything is in such fine working order here. So anyhow, let's try to show the audience if we can.
We can move this back here. I have, right here, there's a funny story that goes along with this piece here. This is a piece of needle lace. And you probably think it's all a real piece of lace. Well, it is a photocopy. And the story behind this one is I have a very good friend in Bruges in Belgium. She owns a lace shop. The minute my daughter and I walked through the door, this piece was showcased in the cabinet. And I said, I have to have that piece. And my friend laughed at me. And she said, Joanna, that piece is $10,000. Of course, it was longer than this. It was probably about a yard or so. And my daughter looked at me and said, I'm not explaining this one to Dad.
Not going to take that
So
home.
obviously I didn't bring it home, and she wouldn't cut it for me, which I fully understand why. It was a fully intact piece. You could tell here where it was started. But she did make me a photocopy. The original now lives in Saudi Arabia.
Naturally.
And but I'm just happy to have this because there are so many intricate filling stitches.
Tell the audience about the book that you bought with the actual pieces of lace that's in the curio cabinet.
This was another piece that I came across in one of my trips to Bruges. I always had a dream of owning a lace dealer sample book. And what that is an actual book of lace that the lace makers would cut a sample of what they make. It would be pasted into this book and taken to a large store. Say if they were in the outskirts of Paris, it was brought into a Parisian store, and people would buy by choosing it.
And what era?
What
Are we talking 1800 now?
We're talking this era, probably about 1800s, maybe even early 1900s. And but this was done even prior to this.
It was great wealth was determined by people's lace.
I mean, early on, the value of their attire, the lace on their attire, was worth more than their property, their home, and their land. But again, in buying this book, I hemmed and hawed. It was in the window of the lace shop. And of course, the price tag was a little pricey, and I went in and spoke to her. And what really forced me to buy it was there was a gentleman who was going to purchase the book and sell it page by page.
Oh.
I wanted to keep this intact as part of history. So I made the commitment and I bought it. And what it is are actual samples of lace, silk lace, white lace, black lace.
What you told me is later on, after owning this book, you found this. Was this the one that matches with it?
Yeah, this goes with it. But I also, there is, in the front of this book, there is a name, which is J. Arsac, and an address. Well, for all I know, I knew it was French because it was Rue whatever. And the name sounded familiar to me. I realized I had a book written by this gentleman, and I realized it was from the Le Puy area of France. I had a friend going over there. She found his old address and his daughter. He was indeed a lace collector and a lace historian.
As you are.
Yes, and he wrote a book about lace, and this was part of his estate that was sold off. And when my friend was over there, she came across this wonderful book, and it shows, if you could hold that page, Dolly, of the wonderful lace makers of the era when this book was produced. You could see them here in their backyard with a baby in a crib.
Now, you were telling me before that they worked in damp places because it was very essential to making the lace.
Earlier than this, like in England, probably in the late 17, early 1800s, they would use linen, and linen gets, as you know, very brittle.
Right,
it's dry.
Coarse until it's refined.
Yes, so they would go into their basement where it was damp, a dirt basement, so obviously the lighting was just deplorable, or they would go out to their barn because the breath from the animals was damp.
And then they would use this lamp, which we're going to try to show everyone, which is something like nothing I've ever seen.
Yes, it's a lamp that reflects candlelight through water.
Through water. So the candle was in this.
And it reflects magnified light, and it would offer them the light that they needed to see.
I don't know how they had the eyesight to produce this finest
Dolly,
work.
that these lace makers, the years on these pictures were this past century, 1926,
Right.
1911.
Men and women.
Men and women. And they practiced this art up until then as a way of earning a living. Of course, the lace isn't as refined as it was earlier. You can see these were mostly pieces to be used for home furnishings.
On the back of chairs.
On the back of chairs.
Right. I'm wearing some of the things that we use on the backs of chairs.
As
actually.
you can see, it's
sewn
more
them on.
prominent. It's a heavier lace.
Heavier lace. It's embarrassing almost when I see the fineness of the lace that you own. You were telling me that some whole economies were based on lace and the sale of lace to other countries and for fashion.
There were all kind of edicts. There were religious persecutions, and people went from country to country taking their skills with them. And that's a lot of times you'll see that different types of laces mirror from another country.
Oh, I see this.
But now, the history of lace, too, there isn't a definite time period from when it really started. They've traced it back through paintings and some writings to, like, the 1500s, maybe late 1400s.
How about these wonderful books that you had? Because you told me it's not something that's impossible to learn about. If somebody watching today found this very intriguing and they wanted to learn about lace, and you said there's some good books.
The original book that I had was not good for me personally to learn from. It just boggled my mind. This is the first time in something I had to really take a class to learn it. The weaving I already knew, but took the class just to make sure. But what I did was, in order to learn this, the books, what you see in the books now, they're color-coded.
I can't imagine how, you can't teach yourself this though. You can, you do.
Once I took a first class, I've taught myself other types of lace now. Now this is an English lace. I started off with a very basic torchon lace, which is geometric. It's done on a 45-degree angle. This is done on anywhere from 52 to 60-degree angle, so it changes it. It gets more rounded, a little bit floral.
Is it the angle of the bolster? In other words, the bolster
it's the angle of the pattern. See the dots? They're done on an angle. And here, what I've done for myself, so I know how far I've progressed, I'll pick an easy pattern. And you have to prick the pattern first. You mount it on a hard board and cover it with a blue mat because it's easier on your eyes, and you also could see the contrast of the white thread.
Oh, I see.
And then I'll do myself up a sample. And this way also it tells you if your thread gauge is right that you're using.
Where does anyone go to school though? I mean, to learn something in this country?
There's a group called IOLI, which is the International Old Lacemakers Group. They're worldwide. There are about 2,000 of us worldwide that belong to this. They have a convention every year. Every year it changes. One year it's Puerto Rico, Indianapolis, San Antonio.
Oh, so it would be in the United States.
Yes, there are quite a few throughout the United States. But again, all different levels. Some write books, some just learn it as a craft. As you can see, I'm not that good of a lace maker. I need to know how it's made in order to study its origins. My eyesight is not that good, and neither is my patience. But
well, you've made some exquisite things, like there's a little hat that you've made that you said will be.
Yes, that was my granddaughter wore that for her christening. I do different Christmas ornaments for my children every year. I would like to be able to pass down something I've made to my family, like the other lace makers, but they didn't make it for their families. They made it for the rich.
For a living.
And for a living, they got paid nothing, literally nothing. And I'm trying to keep their memory alive as well as keep the lace alive.
Well, you're doing a good job. Here you are. Are you originally from Easton?
I was brought up in Easton, yes.
And from Easton, you've gone worldwide to learn and gone to Europe many times to learn and to collect and to find
I felt that was the only way. I'm not really a tag sale person. I don't do flea markets.
I don't know if you find lace of the quality that I've seen here today
really
in
looked,
a tag sale.
And I couldn't really find that type of thing here.
I don't know if this gives anybody an idea of what this is. A head ornament of some type.
It's called a lappet, and it was worn as a headpiece. And this particular one dates probably to the middle 1800s. And it's called Brussels Duchesse lace. And it's a Belgian lace. I like to buy from places that give me a certificate of authenticity. This adds a little bit of credibility to my collection because people just aren't questioning my judgment as to what it is. It's signed by the expert who sold it to me. This happens to be a piece of needle lace. It's French, and it's called Luxoy. And it's a parchment pattern, and you could see...
Oh, this is the pattern underneath?
Yes. You could see it's drawn, and you work on top. It's a handmade tape. And the women form the tape to the design of the pattern.
Oh, I see. They make the tape first, Joanne, and then they...
Yes, and then they make the scrolls.
I see. And then they put
these... And then they fill in the stitches.
In between that holds the tape together.
This is very, what I call more of like a peasant lace.
Now, is this linen thread?
Very heavy. This is a linen thread. And the interesting part about this one here is I happen to find for my postcard collection.
Is that the same
It's
lace?
the same lace, not the same pattern, but you could see here it says Luxoy.
Oh.
And a French woman.
People couldn't imagine the detail in these things till you look through it with these magnifying glasses.
Yeah, I spend hours and hours. My eyes just get...
Yeah, I know people originally that did this kind of work really lost their eyesight, I think, doing it.
When the girls started at about 5 years old, they would go to a lace school and they would learn basic, and then they would move up. By the time they were 30, they were blind.
That's what I had heard, especially the people who wove paisley shawls. I mean, the detail. And then when we show the audience this lamp that they work by, it's a candle, and around it is a globe, a glass globe with water in it, and reflection from that, I guess, from the candle was your source of light.
And you would, back then, daylight, everybody was outside for the daylight in the summer when the sun was really strong, because there you were able to get the best light, and they worked a lot during that period. But again, it took a toll on their eyes.
I'm sure it did.
But they were very proficient because most of the time they only worked one pattern their whole life. So they were able to, like someone who only played the piano one piece for their whole life.
So they didn't look that much at what they didn't have to look at.
When I go now to Europe and see the women doing it, I mean, you cannot believe how fast the bobbins move. You just hear this click, click, click.
Really?
Click, click, click.
You told me people travel on the plane with these traveling.
I have a travel
pillow.
And I had bobbins specially made in
Talk
England.
about, what do you call it, travel illness, doing bobbin lace when you're on a plane.
I need absolute silence. I am one of those people who cannot be interrupted. I don't do well in classes either when I take a class because everybody can chatter and make lace at the same time.
And you can't make those bobbins click.
I have to.
Well, you're good at so many things. I wanted to tell everybody, Joanna did a display in Easton, in the library, in our display cases, and I don't know, it caught the world here in Fairfield County by surprise, and they came out and photographed her. It is an amazing thing to see all this lace in this one place, and she made the front page in color of the paper, and it's in this day and age where everybody's computer crazy and doing whatever, the technology is just moving so
I never
fast.
thought I would get interested in technology, but the
But you are?
computer has been the greatest thing. I do have a web page out there now, and I made it for people like me who are very interested in learning about lace. But when you go to a museum today, they don't let you in to look at their collection. It's put away. You very rarely see lace on display, and they don't have the time or the budget to allow you to do it. So now when I go to Europe, I buy small pieces of lace because they're study samples. It allows me to lay them out on the table and study each one individually, see how, from every era, how each one changed. But I also put them up on the internet now and do a little essay and explain each piece and the different stitches. So people who don't have the availability to either collect or to go to a museum could hopefully learn something from my page.
How fascinating.
And also, I keep in contact with my friends in Europe.
Oh, and the email. You can email the Lacemaker
I know
friends.
when there's classes going on, where there's a famous, an
wonderful.
important exhibit. And also, if you have a question about, if you're working on a piece of lace and I can't call you and ask you, Dolly, what do I do next?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, well, neither would any of the stores around either. No one
Right.
carries the supplies.
Oh, the threads, the
And
fine
a lot
threads.
of suppliers are on the internet now, too. So
That's
that,
been a real blessing.
I've become
technology.
computer literate, yes.
Good for you. You just do everything. And I wanted a few other things to share, like the books. Can we show people? I mean, there are quite a few books,
There are
you say.
quite a few books. If you want to start, and this is a very inexpensive but very good book called The Identification of Lace by Pat Earnshaw. She also has a book out called The Lace Dictionary. And you can find wonderful pieces of lace in here with a description. And if you're at home, I mean, it does help. It's not as good as seeing the real thing, but it is a big help.
Now, you told me you went and took a course with this. This is the Bible. This weighs 20, 30, 40 pounds.
This is the Lace Bible. I carried this on the plane with me this past May. I wouldn't let it out of my hands. This was written by Santina Levy. She was the former keeper of textiles at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She had access to the finest lace collections in Europe, as well as
So, this is for a real lace aficionado, huh?
it is. And as you can see, here's my
Plane ticket?
plane ticket. And what I did was I went this spring on a lace identification course where she allowed us to bring our own personal pieces that she would identify and we would discuss. And we also learned how to identify.
So, this is in England?
Yes, this was in England, in Honiton, southwestern England. It's a very famous lace-making town. And I really was mesmerized by this class. Some of the foremost lace collectors of Europe. I was one of 3 Americans that came, and they treated me royally.
Now,
they really did.
Now, we have language here. We have people who are French, probably. and
Yes,
people
but they
who
all spoke English.
Everyone spoke English?
Yeah.
We have Belgium people from Luxembourg.
Yes,
And,
and this, it was fantastic. And Santina was a great teacher, and, you know, even someone like her who has seen the most exquisite laces in the world, she still doesn't consider herself the expert on this subject.
so much to know. Now, you told me on the internet you were lucky enough to purchase a family's lace recently. You didn't tell your husband that you were.
Well, I'm addicted to the auction sites.
Yeah, you along with
and
others, I hear.
I went on eBay, and you really have to know your laces when you buy off of there. I have to say the quality of the pictures that most of the people put on are good enough that you could tell whether it's handmade or machine-made. I don't buy machine-made. I'm just interested in the handmade.
Right.
this collection came up that it was English laces. Again, not too sophisticated or really exquisite pieces, but they had history behind them. The collection came with quite a few collars and little edgings, but it also came with the family history and the bobbins with the family lace name on them. So this was a family from Kettering, England. The couple had married, came to the States. This was in the 1800s. They raised a family, but they also were still interested in their lace making background. The family name, the father was Samuel Poole, and I have a bobbin with his name on it, and quite a few antique bobbins from that family.
And then the most exquisite thing is how you display everything, which we're going to try to show everybody in those beautiful shadow boxes.
Yeah, I cannot stand collecting things and having them packed away. I live with my collection. I live with this passion.
I sure do.
I babysit for my granddaughter, and the way to get her to sleep is to go in circles around the house with her in the stroller. It allows me to pass this wall of lace every time and just...
This exquisite wall of lace that's behind me.
Yes. It just invigorates me every time I walk by, and now she's pointing to it.
It just amazes me that you could be, you know, in this day and age with all this going on, you could be home bored, you could be watching television, you could be in whatever crazy dysfunctional, or you could be home just loving this lace
Talk
and
about
town.
bored. I'll show you what. This will keep me busy for the rest of my life. This is, again, part of my collection that I haven't even begun to study yet. You can see the certificates of authenticity. And these, when I get bored, I'll put out on the table, study each one, and then put them into groups where I can display them together.
Oh, and those wonderful display boxes that you make
Yes.
up. And you have such a
so
gift for
I
that.
just have, you know, hundreds more.
And you
to
make
go
notes
through.
notes on what you're
I
looking
make
at?
notes, and what I do is, so when I really don't want this collection to go to a museum when I die,
That
because
sounds
I'm afraid,
heartless, though.
no, I'm afraid that they're going to pack it away or they won't really know its value. And what I'd like to see, if my children don't want it, is to go to a teaching institution. I have a large library of books that on lace. I have about 150 books on the history and the style, and also to teach how to make it. I would love to see that to go someplace else.
You mean like
to a
the
teaching.
Like the Thousand Islands Textile School?
That type of thing, or any place where someone is going to have hands-on use of this.
I couldn't tell you how exciting it was being here today with Joanna Smith. I've known her for 2 decades, and I always knew she was a lace maker and a collector, but to touch and to look and to see the richness of all these laces together in one place at one time, it was just a thrilling experience. And I'm just really happy that my cameraman, Victor Cromwell, and I took the time and had the opportunity to come and do this today.